Welcome to Newcastle Family History Society podcasts. The Newcastle Family History Society, located on Awabakal land in Newcastle, New South Wales, Australia, provides support for those interested in family history. We respectfully advise Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples that this podcast contains the names of deceased Aboriginal persons and mention of historical events that may be disturbing. In this final episode of our podcast series, based on the lives of governors, commandants and convicts, we include three people who remained in the Hunter Valley to become valuable contributors to our cultural and agricultural colonial development. Based on historical records, we include a hypothetical conversation of farewell between the main characters in this exploration of a special time and place in our colonial history.
In 1816, the Newcastle penal settlement had a convict population of 287 people. By 1817, 1 year later, there were 440 convicts living and working at Coal River. They'd been transported earlier or more recently, but serendipitously, for a time, was a small group of privileged convicts living in close proximity on the upper slope of the river. These included, amongst others, John Tucker, the long-serving superintendent of stores, Richard Brown, the botanical artist, James Hardy Vaux, the writer, Henry Ransford, the schoolmaster, Molly Morgan, the entrepreneur and farmer, Walter Preston, the engraver, Joseph Lycett, the landscape artist, Joe Hunt, the carpenter, Patrick Riley, the building supervisor, and their respective families. The convicts were not only living and working in close proximity. Despite their varied backgrounds and ages, they did share a history of suffering, and that may have meant that they also shared motivations, a common goal, survival together. All convicts had had to survive the British jails and hulks, which were privately run and based on the controllers' need for economic advantage. The elector-dependent British politicians were aware that their influential voters, especially in London, Wandsworth, Portsmouth and Plymouth, wanted to be rid of the sight and the smell of these prisoners. Their solution, transportation, was promoted as being a more humane solution than death by public hanging, and for some it was. The convict transport ships after the First Fleet were also run for profit by contractors who were paid by the British government, which did not require that the convicts survive the voyage. In the worst cases, the male convicts were starved, flogged and double-chained on the lower orlop deck, sometimes up to their waists in contaminated bilge water, and deprived of light and exercise. At Sydney, Parramatta and Newcastle, those convicts who had any skills to promote the colony and its representatives naturally used them to survive. The female convicts, like the men, had to prove their worth in this social experiment in New South Wales. In the case of Molly Morgan, she was granted a ticket of leave in Parramatta for her good character, business acumen, and farming skills, which contributed to the establishment and progress in the colony. However, after working for 10 years, she was found guilty of appropriating a government cow. Consequently, she forfeited her ticket of leave, farm and animals, and was transported to the dreaded settlement at Coal River. Molly Morgan arrived in Newcastle in 1814, where she, like everyone else, had to make herself useful. She had many valued skills, such as being numerate and literate. In addition, she had agricultural knowledge, having come from a rural area in Shropshire, which was well known for its farming and dairy products. The mostly urban convicts, who found themselves in Newcastle, had to cultivate the vegetable patches and commandant's garden to provide food, and Molly Morgan had the know-how. Molly also knew how to sew and cook, skills that she had learned from her mother at home in Corfton, performed as a servant in the nearby manor and in her own house. Possibly she taught women in the original Parramatta jail, and then in her seamstress shops in Plymouth and Parramatta. Another convict whose history is on record and was in Newcastle at the same time as Molly Morgan, as well as the convict artists and artisans already discussed, was Thomas Joe Hunt, who had been at Coal River since early 1814. Joe, under the supervision of the Irish convict supervisor Patrick Riley, used his skills as carpenter and brickmaker to survive. He wasn't a big man, the convict indents describing as being 5 foot 8 inches tall, with swarthy skin, black curly hair and hazel eyes. But he was young, only 20 years old, strong, and had a reputation as a tough, having been convicted of highway robbery with violence back in central London. The official records state, "Tried at Old Bailey, London, accused of highway robbery, feloniously making an assault in a certain open place near the King's Highway upon William Green on the 16th of October, putting him in fear and taking from his person and against his will a watch valued £2, a steel chain valued 1 shilling, a steel seal valued 1 shilling, a steel chain valued 3p, and a watch key valued 3p, his property." He was found guilty and sentenced to death. However, this sentence was commuted to transportation for life. His nickname, Joe the Marine, was the nom de guerre that he went by beginning in the early days in his gang of 4 who robbed and assaulted people in the dangerous city streets around the Fleet prison, and by which he had been identified. During his trial, the witness, Susanna Green, who was the wife of the man he had assaulted and robbed this time, stated,
"They used to call him Joe the Marine. I never knew him by any other name until now. I had known him 12 months before. I had served him with goods. I sell oysters by the side of Fleet Market when I'm not out at work. I saw him on the 11th of November. I spoke to him about my husband's watch. He said he had not got it. He smacked my face and ran up Eagle and Child Alley into Shoe Lane and made his escape."
Mr. Green, in his evidence, stated,
"The 4 men came to me, one stood before me and one on each side, and when I turned myself round, the prisoner,"
referring to Joe,
"knocked me down and I felt my watch come out my pocket."
The judge then said,
"Now you tell me the prisoner was the man that knocked you down."
Yes, I had seen him many times before. I turned myself round, I had an opportunity of seeing him before I was down on the ground.
Were you very much hurt with the blow?
With the blow and with the fall.
According to the trial records of Old Bailey, earlier on the same day, Joe was accused of physically assaulting a woman whom he suspected of having Mr. Green's watch and pawning it. As the woman did not appear in court as a witness to this complaint, the charge was dropped. Would the judge and jury have forgotten this accusation in his sentencing for the crime against Mr. and Mrs. Green at Fleet Market? Joe had his shady past, like everyone in the colony, and as they all did, he made himself useful to his friends. During the day, the group of privileged convicts, which now included Molly Morgan and Joe, were to be found working in the soldiers' barracks, huts, the commandant's garden, the communal vegetable patch, in workshops, in the government storehouse, the church, or the school. Each had their reputations and various skills to offer to the settlement and to each other. Some commandants, and especially Governor Macquarie, seemed to believe that the carrot, as well as the stick, were necessary if the colony was to survive and become self-sufficient and thrive. The convicts were required to continue their various projects for the commandants, of course, but in general their afternoons were free. Constant hardship and torture were no longer their daily lot. Commandants and governors arrived and departed, the settlement expanded and changed, and our original group of jailbirds includes 2 or 3 more convicts of special use. They must have had their private meetings in their relatively free time in this jail without walls at Coal River. Imagine, if you will, such a meeting of the old lags. There's Dick Brown, Walter Preston, James Howard Evo, and Joseph Lycett, sharing tobacco and probably some beer and brandy at the end of the row of convict huts on the riverbank at Newcastle.
What's going on in that head of yours, James? It's not like you to be silent for so long, or not make a commentary on the unfairness of our situation.
Well, Walter, at times I cogitate on the winding currents that have brought us together. washed up here on this unlucky horseshoe-shaped beach on the banks of Coal River, Newcastle, New South Wales.
As a rule, we don't talk too much about what we did back home and how we washed up here. No need for questions and answers between us. For most of us, one word can bring it all back again, though. Just saying, the Guildford to young Bill Craig would set him off for days. We were on that cursed ship, the both of us. Don't mention the Retribution. That was the damned hulk we were on before that.
Yes, Walter, you are right. The stories are written clearly enough on the tattoos and scars on our bodies. We all have stories, and I will tell mine, but in the end we've ended up here.
In the end, you say. It's not the end yet, James. I got a good reputation from working for Ep5 in Sydney when he published our 12 Views of New South Wales. Good they were. Right, Dick? Dick and I got reputations from work with Scotter. You yourself, James, made your dedication to the powers that be in your dictionary. That gave you a good reputation as smart and useful. And here, well, not bad for a few of us lucky ones. You with your comfortable job and writing, James. Dick's got his drawings, and Joseph's still doing his sketches and his paintings. I know too well the hell of Limeburners Bay over there. I'm out of that inferno for good, as Bill Craig is my witness. And I know about the mines, like you, James, though you've been lucky to get the job in the stores with John Tucker this time.
Lucky, you say? I did have the education, the knowledge and experience as a clerk in London, and I worked for the storekeeper down on the Hawkesbury River. And I have done my time in the coal mines. Once is enough for me. I'll find a way to continue my memoirs for as long as they serve to protect me. I've got 2 huts of my own now, and the lovely Frances to keep me happy here. She might even cure me of my roving ways. And you, Dick?
I have a mind to stay here just to see if she does that, James. You might as well marry her. I've got my own family now, so I hope to watch and draw the people here, their faces, their dances, the way they live. And I never tire of these flowers and animals and birds that no one back there has ever seen. I only hope this country will stay like this forever. And that we'll always have a Burgon, a Benelong or a Bungaree to help us understand how these men and women have lived here and survived for so long. But that depends on the commandants. They are a fickle bunch. We all know what Captain Wallace did at that massacre before he came here. And the almighty Macquarie.
So, Dick, you too are hoping for a miracle. For me to marry and you to just forage and draw and return to Sydney. Me, I'm getting away from here and I won't be returning to these secluded shores. Perhaps we'll get to Dublin, where my girl is from. James Hardivo, for one, is still flash and up for adventure.
Joseph, you haven't said what you've seen in those noisy dreams of yours. It's only you and me these days, but a hut is still very small, my old chum.
Well, we've known each other for a time, lads. Both here in Newcastle and in Sydney, and some of us on the hulks and coming out here in the bowels of the ships, no matter which one. So, I have my wife and daughter. I long to see them again. I think I can get some protection from the powers that be in Sydney. Ep5 might help. When he sent some of our work to London, we'll pay for our passage back home when my time is up and see if I can make a better living with my little family. At least the beer is better back there. Though Abe the brewer does what he can in Sydney. I tell you what my dreams are about, Wall. A pint or 2 of black grouse stout and a pint or 3 of hoppy bitter.
Do right, Joe. I'll die a happy man if I never have to eat kangaroo stew or salty rancid mutton again. Although, Sydney won't be much better. Mind you, thanks to James and John Tucker in the stores, we were lucky to get any meat at all in this place. Patrick Riley does what he can with the liquor, but you still have to go a very long way for a good brew.
I wish Commandant Wallace hadn't started the building work at our old spot on the rocks and moved us on. We've lost our view of the little knobby island Our local friends call it Waibagamba. They have a story about a big kangaroo who lives there under the rocks. Sometimes he slams his tail and everything falls down. But we don't know when. Let's hope it's when we've gone.
There's more and more sand here now they've channeled the waters, so that's all right for us. But before, we didn't have to watch and smell the smoke from the lime kilns, nor hear the noise of our poor chums smashing rocks for the breakwater.
I sense that here in Newcastle things are changing. Commandant Wallace treated us relatively well with the help of his good friend Berrigan and some of the others. But the men and women who now come to the valley from Sydney, Parramatta and the Hawkesbury have told us what is happening down there. It is a bloody war, and it will soon be here.
And soon they'll have a road from there to here. Some chums have followed the tracks away from here, and the explorers and surveyors are using the trackers from the other tribes to find their way.
Molly Henry and I read about what is happening in the colony, thanks to the Commandant's Sydney Gazette. Soon they'll have more magistrates and ministers, and only want free settlers. Free means paying and grabbing land they haven't even seen, don't know how to find, and don't know how to use. And these settlers will be none too happy if us convicts get there first on the best land on the rivers and up the valley. You read only what they want you to know, but even so I understand that the events transpiring in other outposts will, sooner rather than later, happen here at this settlement. And further up Hunter's River if we spread out. The more of us come, the angrier they'll get.
I can tell you too, chums, our naked brethren are getting fed up with our antics. What happened under Commandant Wallace down in Appin and Aids is no secret. Neither are the earlier times, when Governor Phillip and the others demanded the stringing up of 10 of them for the farming couple who were killed on their raids, or on the attacks on the Hawkesbury. These people know they can't trespass on each other's territory, but they can warn each other about what's happening up and down the coast. They know that we ghost people are not going away. Just look out there at how many boats are in Cole Harbour.
This view where we're sitting now shows us the changes that the breakwater has already made to the river and tides. Wallace started his building of the rocky barrier from our old spot looking over at Nubby's Island because of too many shipwrecks, not safe enough for the ships, not enough money being made, and not good enough for new arrivals.
How many have slipped into the sea at the base of the cliff? Most of the chums don't even know how to swim, and we've all seen those hungry sharks.
Being here on this small beach changes your perspective in more ways than one. And we don't know what changes each commandant will bring. Some need us, some don't.
I think you're right, James. Each of us has to make our own plans, then call us lucky if you will. The colony is changing. The locals have to move further from these lands or fight. Most of them still help us, but for how long? There's only so much that beer and tobacco can do to hold them. Friendships with us have ended in disaster for some, and they know it.
They travel along their own well-worn tracks. Depending on the seasons, they have their meetings and connections with other groups. They tell their stories in many ways, be it warning smoke about arriving ships, or knowledge from the ones who collaborate with us. It doesn't look too good for any of us.
I wonder if our paintings will be saved and show what it was like to be here for us and them before the big change, if it is coming.
We British have always had artists, collectors and writers on the ships of exploration and warfare. I believe they will publish the authorized manuscripts and diaries of governors, commandants, explorers, scientists and settlers. They want to leave their version of events for their own greater glory. That's what they need us for.
Well, I'd say we will soon be going our separate ways from this hellhole.
But meanwhile, as the old saying goes, birds of a feather flock together.
I believe there is a last line in your old saying, Richard. If I remember correctly, and I usually do, the saying goes, birds of a feather flock together, until the cat comes. There is indeed change in the wind.
Time passed, even here. At Coal River, the convict population in 1819 was 792. By 1821, there were 1,051 convicts here. Our birds of a feather went their separate ways to meet their fates, which included success, suicide, freedom, and even retransportation. In our colonial history, commandants and governors were appointed. There were drownings on the Hunter River, floods, shipwrecks, land grants, and celebrations of marriages. There was the arrival of Commissioner Big to assess progress and complaints in the colony, which soon led to Assistant Surveyor Danga's reorganization of land distribution in the Hunter. Other artists, ministers of religion, explorers, lexicographers, and free settlers made their mark. There was a more reliable overland connection between Sydney, Parramatta, over the Blue Mountains, and to the settlements at the Hawkesbury and Coal River. As well, in our area, there was exploration, expansion, and connection with Patrick Plains and beyond. The frontier wars continued and intensified. There is much more to tell, even about these couple of decades in the very long history of our area, not the least of which is, of course, the significant contribution and impact on the First Nations people, whose story I cannot presume to tell. That is another story which is, finally, being revealed.
We hope you've enjoyed this series of Birds of a Feather, and thanks to Narelle Austen for taking us on a fascinating journey imagining the lives of those who lived and breathed Coal River. There are many other interesting podcasts that can be found on our website www.nfhs.org.au or on your chosen listening platform, and many more to come. So don't forget to follow us and stay tuned to Newcastle Family History Society podcasts.